Today, we have another Trump economic update. Yes, Trump and his administration have been up to lots of stuff again. And I'd like to say it's been another 30 days, but good gravy, it's only been 17 more. Yes. In fact, I could probably fill every day with a Trump economic update. There's something really important that I'd like to talk to you about today. As I was prepping for this, I thought to myself, I feel like I'm getting ready to do a Saturday Night Live skit. Like, there's so many things going on right now that are just plain crazy. It's like loco, crazy news out there. And some crazy things going on. There's also a little bit of good news too. So let's get to it. The reason I decided to do a Trump economic update today is I woke up pretty sad. They are shutting down the Department of Education. Yes, indeed. Now, I don't know about you, and I certainly don't know about 70 million people who voted for Trump to begin with, but education is fundamentally one of the most important things. I mean, the littles are so important. I frequently tell my classes that our human resources are our most important resource as a nation. And yet, here in the United States, we invest the least in our people. And this administration is making it that much harder. I would like to share with you a news piece from MSNBC with Rachel Maddow and Sharia Smith. She is the president of the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 252. She's the one who was going to save the jobs of the people at the Department of Education. She was fired today, but she has some very poignant things to share with us.
Started with a sort of mysterious notice this afternoon, a reference to security concerns that went out to all employees at the U.S. Department of Education. Quote, beginning today at 6 p.m., all Education Department offices will be closed for security reasons. Employees must vacate the building by that time. This notice also said all Education Department offices would be closed tomorrow and no employees would be allowed in. Now, this notice had no details about what these security reasons were, but it was pretty clear what was coming. After all, we've been through this a couple of times already now. It was just over a month ago when people who work at USAID got an email saying their office would be closed the next day and they shouldn't come to work. That was right before Trump set about completely dismantling that whole agency. Employees at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, same thing, sent a very similar note saying their office would be shut for the following week.
I want to just pop in here for just a second and point out who that gentleman was standing before you on the screen, in case you don't know. His name is Russell Vought. He is now the head of the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. He's the one who makes sure that all the checks go out, that essentially what Congress deems is appropriate to pay for, that the president takes care of. Because after all, the president is to enforce all the laws. This current president is making up their own rules, though, and they're actually impounding some of those funds. You see, Russell here, Mr. Vought, is one of the architects of Project 2025. I think he's a psychopath. The only way that you can say some of the things that he said, like tormenting federal workers and the sorts of policies that he wants to have, taking away our Social Security, the Department of Education, things that Americans fundamentally need and want to be healthy and prosperous, you have to be a psychopath to want to remove those from people and to watch them suffer as a result. Back, though, to the news piece.
Just as the White House ordered the entire agency to stop all of its work. And sure enough, tonight, just after the 6 p.m. deadline for Education Department workers to vacate their offices because of some security concern, Trump Education Secretary, the billionaire pro wrestling executive Linda McMahon, announced that her department is cutting its workforce in half. They will begin firing more than 1,300 people from the Education Department tonight. And then, of course, she went straight to Fox News.
That was the president's mandate, this directive to me, clearly is to shut down the Department of Education, which we know we'll have to work with Congress, to get that accomplished. But what we did today was to take the first step of eliminating what I think is bureaucratic bloat. And that's not to say that a lot of the folks, it's a humanitarian thing too. A lot of the folks that are there, they're out of a job. But we wanted to make sure that we kept all of the right people, the good people.
If you find yourself starting to feel a little tug on your heartstrings for those 1,300 people who are out of a job tonight at the Education Department, don't worry. We kept all the good people. We kept all the good people. The 1,300 people who are getting fired tonight, they just aren't, they're not good. They're not good.
What do you think of the use of their language? The good people, the best people. Wait till you hear what Ms. Smith has to say about the people that they kept. But if you would, jot some notes in the comments about what you think about this particular change as we continue to watch Rachel.
Who is this for? The vast majority of the American people do not want this. A poll earlier this month, Reuters Ipsos, found that fully 66% of Americans oppose abolishing the Education Department. Nearly half of Americans strongly oppose it, while only 16% are strongly in favor of it. This is not something Americans want, but Donald Trump is trying to do it anyway, apparently starting with firing fully half the people who work at that agency tonight. Sharia Smith said, "We will fight these draconian cuts." Minutes later, AFGE Local 252 told NPR that Sharia Smith was laid off, along with all 5 of the chapter's other union officers. Joining us now is Sharia Smith. She's president of the union representing 2,800 employees at the Education Department. She served our country as an attorney for the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights until this evening. Ms. Smith, thank you so much for being here on Tonight of All Nights. I am sorry for what you're going through.
Thank you so much, Rachel. My coworkers and I from all over the country really appreciate the platform you're giving us to talk about this.
Is it the case that your whole office is being closed and your colleagues, all of your colleagues at your office are being fired as well, the whole thing?
That's so interesting that you asked the question about our whole office. So we've reviewed the list of people who are set to be laid off. And I also listened to Secretary McMahon's statement about how they're keeping the good people. The people that they seem to be keeping are white men who happen to have graduated from very conservative schools. Not to say that they're not good. I think all of my coworkers are excellent. Many of them are members. But the coworkers that are being laid off as well are also good. What is curious in the U.S. Department of Education is that the layoffs, the mass terminations, the administrative leaves are seeming to affect and impact disproportionately women and people of color. And the Department of Education should be a model employer. And I want American people to think about, do they want their employer to follow this model where the only people that are deemed good enough to keep their jobs and their ability to support their families are people who are from a certain race and are of a certain gender.
Not only do they not care what most Americans would like from our Department of Education and our federal government, they seem to think that the only people deserving of the job, the good people, are white men who went to conservative colleges. And And if you think that's super interesting, wait till you hear this. There's a whole list of words that are disappearing from the Trump administration. And it's shocking, some of the words that are on the list. Things like woman, female. Of course, we expected words like diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I don't know why these are even bad words or not helpful words. But there's even things like sex, trauma, sexuality, race, pronoun, breastfeed, environmental quality, feminism, gender, hate speech, oppressive, oppression, underserved, undervalued, victims, vulnerable populations, tribal. I honestly don't know how many court cases the Trump administration is involved in, but I think this list represents another one. Good gravy. I thought they had something like free speech. It's absolutely insane. And by the way, ladies, especially you ladies who voted for Trump and thinking it was just trans people who'd be on the outs, the reason that women, female, and feminism is on here is because they want to take your rights too. That is why it is only white men who are keeping their jobs at the Department of Education. I'm super sorry to interrupt. But if you're liking this content, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe. I am trying to build up this channel and you can help me. If you'd also like this video, it'll make sure it gets out to other people who also will probably like this content. And if there happen to be other topics you'd like me to create content about, or if you have some questions or concerns about the material in this video, comment below. I'd love to chat with you and get to know you better. Now, back to the regular program. The House did pass a stopgap measure to keep the federal government funded. And then they promptly left for vacation before seeing what the Senate might want to do about it. And since they'll need some Senate votes from the Democrats, here's a little bit of good news. Right now, the Senate Democrats are standing firm in the fact that they will not approve this stopgap measure. Now, they've been talking a lot about things like they want to cut Social Security and Medicaid and all sorts of things. But I also think they need to stand firm on this point. Trump is not funding the things that they already said should be funded. Why vote for another funding package when Trump apparently thinks he can just do whatever he wants? So whatever measure they pass, I believe it needs to include an assurance that Trump must fund it. Now, you and I, and most of the world, other than 70 million voters in America, know that even if they put that in there and Trump says he agrees to it, doesn't mean he'll do it. But at least they have additional legal standing in the courts to ensure that he does. On to other news. Back to those Trump tariffs. Yes, he just keeps going round and round. I can't even keep track of which ones we're doing, which ones we're not doing, who's doing what other places. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but our stock market lost like $4 trillion. That $4 trillion went overseas. You see, everybody else's stocks are doing well now because Trump doesn't know what he's doing. Now, as these tariffs are going round and Trump keeps trying to tell people that the other countries are going to pay the tariffs, I hope his followers are getting the clue that it actually is going to cause inflation here. In fact, global inflation. Not good. Ms. Caroline Leavitt just keeps trying to reinforce this at her lovely little press conferences. It really is quite ridiculous how she holds court. Now, I couldn't remember her name, so I had to look it up. And when I got there, I found out that she's married to a man named Nicholas Rico, and he's 32 years older than her. She's like not even 30 yet, and he's more years older than her than she's even been alive. That's not my place to do personal commentary on personal life choices, but gross. There's so many things in this administration that are gross. Back to the real news. A little known story relates to the Department of Justice and FEMA money. More than a few weeks ago now, one of the attorneys at the Department of Justice resigned because the Trump administration wanted her to seize funds from someone's account. At that time, we didn't know whose account it was. She asked for the legal proof and the standing to do it. More than happy to do it. Just give me the legal standing. There was none. They simply wanted the money withdrawn. She promptly quit, and then a few weeks later, they had someone else do it, withdrawing $80 million from the city of New York's bank account without any due process. They simply removed the funds. Of course, there's a court case for New York City to get these appropriately funds back again. I share this with you because it's scary. They have the ability to access anyone's account and just take money from it. Now, chances are that won't happen to me and you. We don't have enough money for them to really care about, but this is an enormous privacy concern and completely illegal. Meanwhile, Trump is just selling Teslas on the front lawn of the White House. Super important government work there. Here's another little bit of good news, because I woke up yesterday morning praying for Zelensky and Ukraine. They were going to be entering negotiations with Russia, and I prayed that this would go well this time. Now, Russia was not at the table. Neither were Trump and Vance. Thank goodness on the latter two, because good gravy, they don't seem to be able to hold proper decorum. Overall, Rubio seemed to negotiate a pretty good deal for both the United States and Ukraine. And hopefully that big bully Russia will agree and stop being mean and go away. How many of you don't really think that's going to happen? But we can always hope. The deal included a 30-day agreement to a ceasefire, that the United States would resume military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. The United States did not agree to security measures to back up Ukraine if Russia doesn't hold to their ceasefire. But Ukraine did not sign off to give them their mineral rights. That's good. I'm very glad that it's Marco Rubio that's handling this. He knows that Putin is a war criminal. He said it himself. And that is why he sunk into the couch that day when Trump was going after Zelensky. I have to believe there's still people on Capitol Hill who are going to try to do the right things. I think it's really important that we let them know what we think. Whoever represents us, and right now, I'd really like to see us contact the Democrats and tell them to stand strong and not allow any sort of package to go through until it also includes assurances that Trump will actually distribute the funds. I know a big reason that a lot of the Republicans are pushing for this particular budget bill is because of the national debt, or at least that's what they tell us. If you'd like to learn more about that, I suggest you click right there. And I'll see you soon.